The finals record of Brisbane was always going to come up for, I guess, discussion. How have you seen it? And do you see it as the negative some are painting it as?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the facts are that if you're not quite there, when you get to the pointy end of the season, you're going to come up short. And so I thought it was a year where they just stagnated a little bit. Now, I think a lot of that is circumstantial due to the injuries that they suffered to the players that they had. I mean, you look at the finals record there, it's 1-5, but if they take their opportunities in those games, well, then they're clearly in a better situation.
Including this week, this one that's just gone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
the two semi-finals. The GWS 2 years ago in the semi, they clearly should have won that, and then I think strong case they could have won the game on the weekend.
Yeah. Do you agree that was probably a stagnated year, though, in terms of development? Like, it's hard to go through the list and
I reckon, to be honest, really, I thought it was a positive given what they had to deal with. 0-3, some big injuries. Joe Danaher came in. I didn't think he was anywhere near as good as he needed to be on the weekend. In fact, he was poor. But they've got a lot of games into him, and I think he's rediscovered his love for the game, but he's got to rediscover his contest in the forward half. Yeah,
I think they're a better team this year, but what they had this year against other years was they had injuries to the key personnel. Rayner, McStay and Hipwood all missing from that final. So there's three of your six forward line players. And I think the natural development of the guys came along nicely. I thought McInerney was good. So, unfortunately, they just weren't able to get it done. But I think they showed some great resilience in the first month of the football, the month of the season when they were on the road. They could have beaten Geelong down there late in the game. They beat Collingwood the week after the last kick. So I thought they fought their way through it.
Joe Danaher, Gary, if you were assessing his performance and what he needs to do to get better.
Joe Danaher, did you say? Well, he's got to make a decision on what sort of footy player he wants to be, Jared. I mean, that was the occasion, wasn't it, on the weekend, where he had to stand up and be the man, and not be the man to kick 6 or 7 goals, but be the man who could stand in the hole and do what Charlie Dixon's been able to do over the last few weeks, and that is just compete and bring it to ground. And he's had 2 weeks now where he's had to fill a void, and he's come up short in 2 weeks. And I don't know, this might be harsh on Joe, but he played a bit like the decision to leave Essendon, to me. The decision was to get away from Essendon because it was too much of a spotlight and too much of the Danaher name. He didn't want to deal with all the stuff. And then there was the occasion to be the man on a big semi-final, and he just didn't look like he wanted to be that man to me. So, look, you got A-grade players, you got stars, you've got superstars. I reckon Joe's a support act. And that's what we saw on the weekend.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gaz. And you only say that based on the vision that we saw on the weekend and how Joe went about it. I mean, can he be the man? Does he want to be the man? Well, I think we all know the answer to that question, really. Joe is what he is, and that's okay. But Brownie, I'll ask you, have you ever seen Joe Danaher look really desperate on the field?
Oh, no. Look, I wouldn't say that. His final on the weekend was better than the week before. I thought he didn't compete as well as he should have. I didn't think he showed great presence. I thought his aerial work was better in terms of the way he pushed himself to the contest. But, clearly, I agree. He's not the main man. I actually think his numbers may not support this, but I actually think Danaher looked better when he was able to get up and play in the ruck at times, because when he plays on that really dour opponent, like, how often have we seen an opponent get a hold of him at half-time and then Joe rip the game to pieces in the second half when he's had no influence? Yeah. I'm not sure he can really fight his way over the top and be a match winner at the end. That's why I like him going to the ruck.
I just looked at the smallest man in Brisbane's forward line in Charlie Cameron, and the way he went about it with the passion and the excitement and the desperation and the enthusiasm that he brought, compared to Joe Danaher that looked indifferent to the game. And I think we have our answer.
Before we move on to the Western Bulldogs, give your old mob score after we ticked off on the clubs that went out last week.
I'll have to... Yeah, OK, I'm going to start with the Ticks. The resilience in the early part of the year I thought was tremendous, and they had a lot of injuries throughout to key players. I thought McInerney into the ruck. They've really found one there. I know he's not in Nat Nui and Max Gawn's level, but he's just below that. I thought he was fantastic on the weekend, so big tick to him. And I like Kadeem Coleman down back. They found one there. They need to keep improving their speed down back. The cross is obviously the Neil departure. The injuries, the key injuries throughout the season, which they haven't dealt with. And unfortunately, Eric Hipwood doesn't return until mid-year. So I have to downgrade them to a B. I thought they had a pretty solid year, but if you finish top 4, then you go out in straight sets in a final. I can't give you an A there.
On to the Giants, who were pretty competitive on the weekend. Have rebounded off a slow start to have a very good year, but they have got this this problem with their captaincy. Cornelio struggling for form. Toby Green struggling for discipline issues. What do they do with their captain, Roo?
Oh, well, the captaincy is one part of the conversation, and it's a serious part. I mean, I think outside of Toby Green's indiscretion last week, it was just an obvious handover of the captaincy. But Stephen Cornelio he's a shell. He's an absolute shell of himself, not just on the field, off the field as well. When he's spoken publicly and he's addressed the media as captain of the football club, it's uncomfortable. He doesn't look comfortable in the role. I mean, looking at him on the weekend physically, from a pure physical point of view, his running gait looks out now. And I know he's had the ankle issue, and a lot of these conversations are really contingent on him not getting back to his best in 2018, where his player rating numbers were of the elite level. But you just look here, this is him trying to run with Menegay. He just doesn't have it in himself at the moment. It's the leadership, but it's also the contractual issue. You've now got a player signed for another 6 years on, we're led to believe, about $1 million a year. That can potentially be premiership blocking. Yep. Carrying a player like that on your list, if he continues to deliver the ratings there, and to contextualise them, 13 around that mark, that's elite. That's all Australian quality player. 8.8, which he's averaged over the last 2 years, is an average run-of-the-mill player in the AFL.
So is Toby Green, if you're in charge of GWS, Toby Green captain next year?
No, I think it's a player like Josh Kelly.
Is that right?
Yep.
That's challenging. I mean, Toby Green may end up having to miss the first 3 to 4.
But if he wasn't suspended, who's captain?
Oh, yeah, probably Toby Green.
See, I just think you now need to use this as the catalyst for Toby Green. You know, you need to say to Steve Cornelio, look, we need to get you back playing good football. That's how you're going to add value to this team. Yep. Don't worry about the captaincy. We're going to alleviate some of the stress. Yep. Toby Green, you are the captain. This can be the catalyst for him to mature. I know he's 27 years old, but he has shown when he's been the captain this year, and he wasn't that captain last week, that he's a very good player. He's their spiritual leader. So I would pull that. I know it's a risk, but I think it'll work out in the long run.
You're doing the report,
and
Cards.
he's let him down at the most
overall?
important time of the year. He's sitting in the grandstand yet again, the second time in 3 years, at the most important time of the year, because he's thinking about himself. Yeah,
I'm going to back myself in, though, if I'm the GWS bosses, and say, nah, this can work. And Toby needs to take responsibility for it. So here's the report card. Big ticks to Leon Cameron, first and foremost. Magnificent display after a lot of people thought he was in trouble. The young defence, love the young stars coming through. Josh Kelly re-signs, which is great news. And I think Jesse Hogan, very unheralded, signing over the off-season. A lot of folks on Jeremy Cameron leaving. But I thought Hogan was magnificent. Shame he didn't play on the weekend. The crosses, the diabolical injury list. Yeah. For Gita, every year. It's the same narrative, isn't it? We just keep saying the same thing. Then they need to find a ruckman. So can Bruce come through and replace Bruce or Briggs, guys like that, replace Mumford, who's just been magnificent?